Good day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Danie, Laurel.
And I'm Delos Santos. Here are today's top stories. With inflation and rising debt clouding recovery prospects, the Marcos Jr. administration expects 2022 GDP to grow slower than initially expected.
Finance Chief Diokno comes to President Bongbong Marcos's defense after the chief executive said he disagrees with the 6.1% inflation print in June.
The President's disbelief at the 6.1% June 2022 inflation rate figure was misunderstood.
More Filipinos went jobless in May as unemployment rises to 6%.
And the chicken supply crunch is affecting two of the country's largest fast food chains. We begin our broadcast with the Marcos administration tempering its growth target for 2022.
This soaring inflation and ballooning debt continue to pose downside risks to the economy's recovery from the pandemic. Finance Chief Diokno said the government now aims for a GDP growth of 6.5 to 7.5% for this year. This is slightly lower than the 7 to 8% target set by the economic managers of the Duterte administration. Despite the bleaker outlook, Diokno says the local economy is poised for the fastest growth this year among the ASEAN Plus 3 bloc, which is composed of Southeast Asian countries as well as Japan, China, and South Korea.
We expect the economy to grow by 6.5 to 7.5 this year. In fact, this is going to be the highest, the consensus is this will be the highest growth rate among all ASEAN Plus 3 countries this year and next year. Okay, that's the consensus.
Now for 2023 to 2028, the government expects GDP to grow by 6.5 to 8%. That's higher than DBCC's goal of 6 to 7% for the years 2023 to 2025. The new targets are part of a medium-term fiscal framework which was approved during the first cabinet meeting. Diokno also said the GDP ratio would be lowered by 2025 to 60%, which is the internationally accepted threshold for developing economies. Now, as of the first quarter, the debt to GDP ratio stands at 63.5%. Economic managers will review this new set of economic assumptions tomorrow.
So we want to show the world that we are conscious of having a sound fiscal management. I think we still have a lot of fiscal space because we are confident that our revenues will pick up.
Now, another one from the Finance Chief, Secretary Diokno clarified that President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s remark that the 6.1% inflation in June was not that high was only a misunderstanding. Diokno explained that the chief executive was referring to the year-to-date inflation figure of 4.4% and not the June inflation. Diokno said both June 2022 and year-to-date inflation numbers are within forecast range of the Bangko Sentral and the DBCC. This as the BSP's June forecast for last month stood at 5.7 to 6.5%, while full-year forecast is at 3.7 to 4.7%.
That the President's disbelief at the 6.1% June 2022 inflation rate figure was misunderstood. Okay? He was referring to it as a full year figure when in fact the year to date, meaning January to June, average inflation rate is actually 4.4%. Okay, so that's what he was in mind. Okay, 4.4%.
Now, the peso weakened further on Wednesday to its lowest level in almost 17 years. The local currency depreciated by 44 centavos to close at 55.67 against the greenback. This was the weakest level for the local currency since closing at 55.71 to the dollar in October of 2005. RCBC Chief Economist Mike Ricafort attributes the weakening peso to inflation and expectations of more monetary tightening from the U.S. Fed.
Now, more Filipinos went jobless in May as unemployment rate rose to 6% from 5.7% in April. This means about 2.93 million Filipinos were jobless in May, up from the 2.76 million in April. Meanwhile, underemployment rate also slightly increased month on month to 14.5% in May from 14% in April. This translates to about 6.67 million underemployed Filipinos. Pausing for a quick break, but coming right up after that. With some restaurants unable to serve chicken dishes, is the country facing a poultry shortage?
We'll talk to an industry leader for the lowdown when Business World Live returns. Stay with us. Pag sinisync ko, hindi siya nagpa-flash na mabilis. Pero mag-a-abort yan kasi. Ere na.
And we're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie, Laurel. Now, more restaurants announced that they are unable to serve chicken orders in some branches.
Now, this comes on the back of demand for chicken continuing to pick up while supply declines. In a phone interview with Bloomberg, McDonald's Philippines Corporate Communications Director Adi Hernandez confirmed that certain stores are temporarily not serving chicken. Hernandez said that while the government is accurate in saying that there is no shortage of poultry supply, they still need to uphold certain standards for their products. Likewise, Jollibee Foods Corporation says a small number of Jollibee and Mang Inasal stores are also not able to serve chicken. Although the company claims chicken supply is already improving. Recall that last month, the Agriculture Department insisted that there is no shortage of chicken supply in the Philippines, but just last week, the department also lifted the poultry import ban from Belgium to ease pressure on chicken demand in the country. Data from the DA also show that whole chicken prices in Manila have gone up by 25% to 200 pesos since the start of the year. Now, to better understand just how grave the situation is, we have on the show Elias Inciong, President of the United Broilers Association, or UBRA. Sir Inciong, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, sir and ma'am, and good morning to everyone.
Okay, sir. So, give us an idea here. You have the government saying there is no shortage of poultry, but some fast food joints already unable to serve chicken. So, what then are we dealing with here, and how big of a problem is this?
I do not know how the current incarnation of the Department of Agriculture defines a shortage. But the industry, we are careful about the word shortage. We define it based on our experience in 2003. At that time, there was no chicken in the grocery, no chicken in the fast food and other institutions, and also no problematic situation in the wet market. That is how we define a shortage. Right now, based on that narrow standard, there is no shortage because according to the news items, it's merely a problem of not the chickens being supplied to these fast foods not meeting the weight standards, because these fast food chains, they have a very narrow range of weight requirements, and that is why it is very difficult to serve them. And the companies serving them are really the big ones. The two big Filipino companies, San Miguel and Bounty, which are the national players, and then some regional Filipino players, and then the multinationals. You have Cargill Joy of the US, you have CP of Thailand, Kyron Tokpan of Thailand, Yonghap of Malaysia, CJ of Korea, New Hope of China, East Hope of China mainland, and there's a new company, Growell of Taiwan. And there's so much competition there. Also, we have to understand, most of the small and medium scale players, we cater to the wet markets. We leave the fast food to the big players because number one, the fast food, they require large volumes with strict weight requirements, and number two, you need they pay a little. The terms we cannot handle the terms.
Okay. Sir, pero you mentioned wala pa pong shortage here in terms of amount of supply, but with the quality or the weight, which may come from other countries, sir. But we do note that there's also problems in other Asian regions. For example, in Malaysia, they've stopped exporting to Singapore. And in Singapore, there's also a shortage. So do you see this kind of problem in the near term happening, especially with oil prices elevated, feed also getting very expensive, so mahihirapan na tayo mag-import specifically for quality chicken?
Ma'am, let me qualify a lot of things that you said. Number one, part of the reason we're having this problem right now, there is a problem with the quality of feeds. When you compare it to past years, it's very poor precisely because the raw materials for feeds, it is of relatively low quality when you compare it to the past. Our animal nutritionists, some of whom are the best in the world, are going crazy trying to adjust their formulations. And that is part of the reason why we have this problem. And another reason is really the growers are conservative. Because after the elections, the anticipation, the rational expectation was that demand will be low because of after the feast of every election, there is a contraction, and that was the expectation.
Sir, qualify lang po, the quality of the feeds deteriorating, does that have anything to do with the Russia-Ukraine war? Or is this a chronic problem?
It just added to it is an aggravating circumstance, the Ukraine war. But the root of the problem is, with respect to corn, our corn farmers, because we prepare local corn, because we can our cycle from loading to harvesting is 30 to 35 days. We prepare local corn because local corn normally is of better quality, and the energy levels are more stable. However, for the past 3 years, our corn farmers have no confidence because in 2020, a large portion of their market disappeared because the hog raisers were also their market, and because of the ASF, a significant portion disappeared, and rational expectations also, they withdrew, or they retreated, they reduced production, and apparently they reduced production to such an extent that from a price range of 14 to 16 pesos in the past 2 years, it is now up to 22 to 23. And that is part of the thing that needs correcting, and it was mentioned by the President. We need to restore the confidence of not primarily the farmers, especially the corn farmers with respect to us, because they have no confidence, because Secretary Dara's administration, it had the propensity to issue or announce special importations. When I say special importation, in the nomenclature of the World Trade Organization, a regular importation is based on tariff rates as you committed to the WTO. Special importation means you are reducing the tariff rate so that you can help the importers import. And because of that propensity, confidence eroded, not only with the respect to corn, but the entire sector.
Sir,
And,
given that, more to your point regarding feeds and corn in particular, like what you
Yes, sir.
mentioned, you have President Marcos Jr. saying that we need to boost domestic production, especially of grains. That includes rice and corn, which, as you mentioned, is being used as feeds here. So how do he is, of course, he is the incoming, or he is already the DA secretary as well. How then should he address the situation when it comes to feeds? And how then do we boost the confidence and the competence as well of our corn farmers? And
How
even as we
quickly also? How
even if
quickly
as
yan
we boost the production,
impact?
gaano kabilis natin mararamdaman yung impact?
Allow me to simplify. Let us put ourselves in the shoes or in the slippers of an ordinary corn farmer. Fertilizer is at record. Fertilizer prices are these are at record high, historical highs, and you have an announced reduction in tariffs, and Secretary Dar did not talk to that sector to give assurance to that sector that at the time of harvest, there will be some assurance that there will be no disaster in terms of their incomes. And hence the very conservative stance or lack of confidence of the corn farmers. On the other hand, as I mentioned, their costs are going up. If you are a corn farmer, will you still plant? The thing to do is to do what the other countries are doing. You assure your farmers. Through number one, you build up strategic reserves. In building up strategic reserves, you influence the market, the farm gate prices at the time of harvest, because intervention should happen during times of harvest or oversupply. That is how it is done in other countries. The problem here, the Department of Agriculture will intervene when producers have withdrawn or have retreated, and then they will propose a special importation.
Sir, last question po. What should consumers expect? Should we expect na tataas pa po yung bilihin when it comes to the chicken, especially as you've mentioned already the high prices of fertilizer and feeds, and you're asking the DA to revive this task force on price and volume? How will this help solve the issue in any way?
Well, as for expectations, we better, because I do not know the entire universe of facts. I cannot pretend to know everything, but the safe thing to do is to assume the worst. I will not BS our consumers and the public. We have to assume the worst so that government will act.
Okay.
So that government will not be complacent. Because if I say that this is a temporary thing and a lot of things can happen, our organization will lose credibility and people will suffer.
Okay, good points here. As was mentioned,
No
it's a
room for
domestic
complacency.
issue that must be addressed fundamentally. It's not just an offshore problem, diba? That's linked to the wars that's out of our control. So maraming salamat for those insights. Elias Jose Inciong, President of the United Broilers Association. Thank you, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Meralco confirms that it has received the order from the ERC directing them to refund distribution-related charges amounting to 21.8 billion pesos for residential customers. This amount is equivalent to a refund of 87 centavos per kilowatt hour. Meralco spokesperson Joe Zeldariaga says they will comply with the ERC directive and that they are now studying how the refunds can be reflected in power bills this month. The ERC further directed Meralco to execute the refund in approximately 12 months or until the amount is fully refunded to its customers.
The SEC has ordered Welcon's Unlimited Systems to once again stop offering investment packages to the public. Now, last June, the Commission initially ordered Welcons to immediately cease engaging in what it described as the unlawful solicitation, offer, and sale of securities until it has registered its business. Welcons has also been prohibited from transacting any business involving funds in Welcons' depository bank. The cease and desist order was issued after the SEC found that Welcons has been offering investment packages worth up to nearly 14,000 pesos with supposedly guaranteed returns of up to 32,000 pesos a day.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. But don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. Dan, with mounting fears of a recession in the U.S., investors finally came back to the local equity market. Tell us more.
I know, Jess. Very interesting thing that you've mentioned here. Yesterday, there was a bit of a relief rally at play, and you can see in the past 3 days, we've been up by 3.8%. However, today, down a touch, but nevertheless, still well above 6,400 levels that we haven't seen in quite some time. Now, what did this? Well, PhilStock says that, the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield fell below the 2-year yield, and that signals a recession over in the U.S. It's a very big signal, and that might have caused a flight of equities or investments over into other emerging markets. Now, according to Bloomberg, the risk of recession here in the Philippines is around 8%. So it's not as bad, let's say, as what we've seen in other countries. And in fact, foreigners started buying again. And if you can see this small portion of green here after 22 straight days of net foreign selling, that's quite a good sign, and hopefully that will be sticking. And finally, just a quick peek on the financial space, Jess, as the bad loan ratio fell to a 16-month low. Nevertheless, you can see the year-to-date still down by 6%. Let's take a quick peek at the one-day chart here. That's up by 0.3%. And finally, just one note before we end the broadcast, we did have the China Foreign Minister Wang Yi visiting Manila yesterday, and they took the opportunity to sign a memorandum with the local bourse. And that's all about the Bank of China having an understanding. There's a Bank of China Manila branch actually, and they will be providing services in support of bilateral investments with the Philippines. So there might be, this might fast track the stock connect. So there's a connection between the Philippine bourse and 3 stock exchanges in China, according to PSE President Ramon Monson. So very exciting times there.
It's something that definitely we're going to be keeping tabs on. And that's it for today, July 7, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess de Los Santos.
And I'm Danie Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.